You've probably heard the phrase, war is the continuation of politics by other means. Well, that's Clausewitz. But what does that actually mean? It's one of the most important and honestly most misunderstood ideas about conflict ever. So today we're going to unpack his masterpiece on war and get to the core ideas that still, to this day, shape how we think about war. Let's dive in.
So to get to the absolute heart of his theory, Clausewitz wants you to picture something really simple, really primal. Two wrestlers locked in combat. The point isn't just to score points, right? It's to use pure physical force to make the other person do what you want them to do, to submit. This incredibly simple, kind of brutal image of a duel, well, that's the foundation for everything else he's about to build.
Okay, first up, war as a duel. Clausewitz really insists we start here. Why? Because before you can even talk about grand strategy or politics or anything complex, you have to understand the raw, fundamental nature of what conflict actually is at its core.
And here it is, his famous definition. And it is brutally simple. It really only has two parts. The means, that's an act of force. The objective? To make your enemy do your will. I want you to notice what's missing here. In this core definition, there's nothing about glory or honor or justice. It's purely about bending another person to your will through violence. That's it.
So, think about it. How do you actually make someone do your will? You can't, not really, as long as they can still fight back. And this leads to a super important insight. The immediate goal of warfare, in its purest form, isn't just to win a skirmish or take a hill. It's to completely disarm your enemy, to make them totally powerless to resist you.
Now, this is where things get really interesting and honestly a little bit terrifying. If you take this basic idea of a duel and you follow its logic all the way to the end, Clausewitz says that war has this built-in tendency to spiral completely out of control, to escalate to its most extreme and violent form possible. He says this escalation happens because of three reciprocal actions or interactions. First, if I think you might use your maximum force, well, then I have to use my maximum force just to be safe. It's simple logic. Second, as long as you're not totally disarmed, you are a threat to me. So my only logical goal has to be your complete and total defeat. And third, your effort is going to dictate my effort. We start matching each other, creating this vicious cycle that just pushes both sides to their absolute limits.
And this terrifying logical endpoint is what he calls absolute war. Now you should think of this as kind of a lab experiment. It's like war by algebra, where you remove all the messy real-world stuff like politics and fear and chance. In that purely theoretical world, there's nothing to stop two sides from escalating into this pure, unrestrained, violent collision.
But then, right when he's described this absolute horror, Clausewitz pulls us back from the brink with a really important question. Okay, that's the theory. But is this what war actually looks like in the real world? Is every single conflict a fight to the death? Of course not. So what's holding it back?
And this leads us to one of his most brilliant ideas, something he calls friction. Clausewitz says that a whole bunch of real-world factors, everything from bad weather and muddy roads to bad intelligence and simple human fear, they all act like a brake, slowing war down and changing it from that pure theoretical monster into the messy, unpredictable thing we actually see in history.
So let's look at the difference. In theory, war is this single, isolated event. In reality, it's always tangled up in politics. Theory dreams of one single, decisive knockout blow, but reality is almost always a long, drawn-out struggle. And maybe the most important difference. Theory assumes everyone has perfect information, while real war is defined by what Clausewitz famously called the fog of war. All the confusion, the uncertainty, and the sheer dumb luck that can shape a battle.
And that's why he says war isn't like a math problem that has one single right answer. No, it's much more like a high-stakes game of cards. You have to play the hand you're dealt, you have to bluff, you take calculated risks, and you have to rely on your gut, on courage, just as much as you do on cold, hard logic.
So how do we put these two things together? On one hand, you have this logical drive toward total violence, and on the other, you have all this real-world friction holding it back. Well, Clausewitz offers up this brilliant solution in his most famous idea, the paradoxical trinity. First, you've got the raw, gut-level emotions of war. We're talking about the hatred, the passion, the blind, natural force of just wanting to destroy the enemy. This is the fire in the belly of a conflict, and Clausewitz says this is mostly the domain of the people.
Second, there's the element of chance and probability. This is the chaos and the unpredictability of the battlefield itself, that fog of war we just talked about.
This is where a commander's genius, their courage, their creativity can completely turn the tide. This is the realm of the commander and the army.
And finally, you have the element of pure reason, the fact that war is supposed to serve a political purpose. This is the cold, calculated objective that the war is being fought for in the first place, and this, of course, is the realm of the government. So you have these three powerful forces, passion, chance, and reason, and they're constantly pulling at any conflict, kind of like three powerful magnets, and the balance between them is never the same. Their shifting relationship is what makes every war totally unique. This is why one conflict might be a limited border clash, while another explodes into a total war for national survival. This framework is still one of the best tools we have for analyzing conflict today.
Okay, so no matter how that trinity is balanced, no matter how much passion or chance or reason is involved, Clausewitz argues that war only has one way to get things done. There is one fundamental currency.
And that one and only means is combat. Everything else that happens in war, training, logistics, marching, planning, all of it, it's all just a prelude to the main event. The ultimate point of every single military activity is to bring force to bear in a fight, in a decisive engagement.
He has this absolutely brilliant metaphor for this. He says combat is the cash payment of war. Think about it. You can use credit for a while. You can maneuver, you can use diplomacy, you can make threats, but eventually the bill comes due. And the actual fighting, or at least the credible threat of it, is the hard currency that backs everything else up.
And this all brings us to the ultimate takeaway, the single most important, most famous idea in all of On War. If combat is the means, and the Trinity describes the character of war, then what is war's ultimate purpose? And here it is. This is probably the most famous sentence ever written about war. What he's saying is that war isn't some chaotic breakdown of society that happens when the talking stops. No, it is a tool of policy. It is a violent, yes, but fundamentally rational instrument used to achieve a political goal. The political objective is the only reason for the war, and it has to guide every single decision, from the first shot fired to the very last.
And that leaves us with a final, pretty unsettling thought. Clausewitz shows us that war isn't a failure of reason, it's a terrifying expression of reason. And if war is really just another tool in the political toolbox, well, it raises a profound question. What kind of responsibility does that place on the leaders who choose to use it, and on all of us, to make sure that it is only ever used as the absolute last resort?